So this is the Archaeology and History of Cymru. This is part 2 of our churches in Cymru. And to be honest with you, I really struggled on this today. I had to cut out one of the locations I wanted to do tonight, which was going to be St. Barrack's Chapel on Barry Island. But if we do continue, then I can do St. Barrack's Chapel. And no doubt I will be doing the church on Flatholme as well. But more about that from Pete in the near future. So I would like to introduce this site, and I'd like to move on from this site completely. This is a site known as St. John's Church in Slebech, which is probably the completely wrong pronunciation, near Haverfordwest. And what you can immediately see to sort of paint the scene is a church tower poking out of the trees. Now, I am told, my notes tell me that Slebech Church itself in West Wales is one of the largest churches in the whole of Cymru. But we will see if that's the case. So we're going to be visiting one or two places tonight that some of you will have never visited. And in fact, some of the places I've never visited either. But one site I would like to clearly go on to first, and I'm just going to do my notes. I'm just going to do this in front of me. And it's unlikely that I will deviate much from them. There's also another site that I'd like to introduce if we do a part 3 of churches, which is East Orchard Church in St. Athan, which is another site that lots of people are not going to know about. But again, that's for the future. So here we go. And if we can zoom, and we can do that. Oh, it's all going pear-shaped. Right, so the first thing that we're going to go on to, we're going to actually go into the heart of, the heart of the West End of Cardiff, which is Cowbridge Road West and Copthorne, Culverhouse Cross, as people know it. And we're going to look at this location here in the trees. We're going to be looking at St. Mary's Church. St. Mary's Church, Caerau, Ely. It's a site that chills me to the bone because in my lifetime, that a church was operational there. In my lifetime, it had a roof on it. In my lifetime, I went inside. In my lifetime, most of the church has been nicked, stolen, taken away, and there's very little left of it today. So I know that sounds quite dramatic, but that is the dramatic nature of this church of St. Mary's, actually at Caerau itself. It's a very dramatic history, and it chills me to the bone. When Michelle said, "Which churches are you doing tonight?" and I said, "I'm doing X, Y, and Z." What she said, "The one at Caerau," and I said, "Yeah." Is that the one I pointed out to you when we were driving towards the pump house, Cardiff Bay? Yes, that ruin. It's not that church in front, is it? And I said, "Yes, it is." "What, that church?" And I said, "Yes, it is." That church is now, all that's left of that church is basically the spire and one of the gable walls and a few ruins. And this is more or less, slightly different. This is more or less what it looked like around 1985 when I went there with my granddad. When I went there with my granddad, oh, I had a shock, Gillian. The porch door had been ripped off, and inside there was satanic symbols daubed on inside the church. There was all sorts of upside down crosses, you name it. And for a 10-year-old, 10-year-old Gillian, it was quite distressing to see that. So this church itself, a photograph from around the 1920s, showing any typical church in the Vale of Glamorgan. This could, in fact, be St. Peter's at Cogan Hall in the Vale of Glamorgan. This could be the likes of Marcross Church, any of those little weird churches within the landscape. But alas, there's very little of it left today. Oh, there it is. Terrible. Yes, Gillian, you were just about to say something. Bump in there.
No, I was just going to say that's awful.
It is awful, and this is actually this strangely enough, this is actually the best side of the church now, because it looks like there's more there than there actually is. It is, oh gosh. And Michelle said to me, "Why don't you get the let me get my words out. Why don't you get the Friends of Churches to actually buy that thing and do it up?" And I'm saying, well, it's actually now owned by the community, because they've got community archaeological excavations very nearby as well. So
the hill
Yes, the hill fort excavations. You are dead right there, Gillian. Yes. So this is the church you can actually go to. And there's, when we look at the, get my words out, when we look here, sort of what we can actually see is the remains of a ring work as well, which we can see from the aerial photography. We're looking at this now, and this is a photograph from the 1950s. Can you believe it, Gillian?
Wow.
Exactly. This is another good side of it. So my text: having arrived at Cardiff on a day drizzling with rain, this would be my recollection. And in a crowded, noisy train, the solitude and peace offered by this church was gratefully anticipated. But it wasn't gratefully anticipated when I went there in the 1980s. It was a great disappointment to see the roof itself with the slate still on it, with beams sort of slightly charred with internal fires. That being said, when going to the church, from this description, looking within the church, wanting that solitude, outside it was a solitude, inside it was another thing. Michelle said to me, she said, why don't we go and visit the church? And I said, it gives me a really bad feeling, even though it's in the state it is now. Instead of an empty echoing shell of a church that you'll see at other localities, or a ruined, dignified church wreathed with ivy. Wonderful words here. The old parish church of Caerau is crumbling. This is a description from the 1980s, a vandalized shell which has been subject to so many indignities that the greatest shame is that it should be left standing for people to see it at all, because it was that shock. This is actually this is an image, a strange little photograph taken probably when they've taken the roof off, when they're trying to sort of do something with the church. That wall that those boys are standing on in the 1990s is gone. It just went so rapidly. It was unbelievable. The walls are covered inside in graffiti and splash paint back in the 1980s. The interior is choked with fallen rubble, as I can remember it, domestic refuge and broken memorial slabs, and indignities to crosses put upside down, and smashed open graves. All these things, it was absolutely dreadful. Some of the crumbling walls have been hastily propped up with concrete blocks, which I can remember. The porch. So this is actually looking from the northern side. This is in the 1950s. In the 1950s, they decided to give it a complete refurb. They took off the roof. They gave it a complete refurb in the 1950s, and it closed to services in 1973. What an absolute waste, Gillian. An absolutely huge waste of time. What they did in front of the church on the southern side, the porch was actually falling down. So what they did, they built it up with breeze blocks, and I'm going to render over it. And I think we actually bumped into the chap who had actually bought the church and was going to have private services in it, but that was never to be. Even with, Gillian, even with them sort of conserving the walls, people still drive their cars up there and burn them up alongside it, as you can clearly see now. The presence of a vast suburban housing estate at the foot of the hill has led to the church being singled out as a handy target for vandalism and theft. This is a great pity. It looks over the beautiful landscape, the beautiful vista that is the city of Cardiff. Gillian, I used to love Cardiff. I used to absolutely love going there. But everything to do with Cardiff has completely changed now. It's a different landscape. But from the church, you still have a great vista, looking out at sea, looking into the capital, look at the capital monuments that you actually see. It's a reconstruction. And this is very much what you may have been seeing in the 1970s. 1970s, within under 50 years, the church has been completely more or less lost. And if they hadn't conserved the walls when they did, that tower would be gone. So it's a great pity, the potence of the site, the potential of its importance has been minimalized. Now, you're looking at an aerial view. Now, this sort of, and there's a little bit less than this aerial view is actually showing now. But what you can see is the chancel almost completely obliterated. The wall that those boys were standing on, where the cursor is, Gillian, that's gone. And you're talking about the 1990s there. And the entire side of this church wall is gone. The roof is gone and everything. And the porch completely obliterated. The church itself is held within the hill fort, as you mentioned, an Iron Age. What we think with lots of these Iron Age hill forts is that they were actually used for large storage depots. And the interesting thing is, when we look here, this looks towards the heart of Cardiff from this ringwork. One thing I'm going to chuck in here, because I've got so much to do tonight, and I would so much love to actually stay a little bit more in this church, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to, because I've got so many other sites to look at. But this ringwork itself, like many other sites within the Norman landscape, what they did, they built a motte and bailey motted site on a ringwork, and alongside that they built a church. And then this would be where some kind of village would have been erected in the Norman period. But those remains went, and then the church was left behind. And again, back to repeating, going over old ground, the last service was in 1973. It was loved and respected until 1973, that date, and then everything changed. It became neglected and rejected from society, which is a shame with lots of these churches. But let us return to the sad church. This was formerly a subsidiary chapel of the great cathedral of Llandaff, and became a separate parish church within the Reformation in the 1500s, 1540. The core of the existing building, as architectural details indicate, it dates to about the 1200s, probably built in about the 1100s. Having a tall, beautiful tower with a vaulted porch. A vaulted porch. Wow, that's all gone. That was all lost. That all collapsed in. It all went. A saddleback roof, a gabled roof. So you had gable to gable, and then you'd have the church tower. And there was reconstruction work. Again, there was reconstruction work in the 1950s. And then its last use. And unfortunately, we've got to leave this wonderful church now, St. Mary's Church. But I'm sure we could make it another topic in the future. But as we go back, that's the next church we're gonna look at. But that's inside the church in about the 1930s. The church that we looked at St. Mary's Church, Caerau. That's what it looked like, and it's a massive shame that that's all gone. Those stairs there. So we're looking in this. Gillian, keep that in your mind. Those stairs there, right? So if we go back through the images. That's where those boys are standing.
Ah, right.
Can you countenance that? Can you? I just think if any of this plaster had medieval paintings, they're gone. It's all gone. That's the tragedy, and that's basically what that was. And the font and everything, and you can't. To be honest with you, I don't know what happened to the font. All I can remember going in there, and I remember I was standing here with 1984, 1985. I remember looking at that, and my granddad said, just don't go up those stairs. And I did actually go up to those stairs, and I was saddened by what I saw. I can't describe what I saw, but it was not nice. Terrible things painted and so on. But we don't have that story with the other sites that we're going to be looking at now. Now, I would like to take us to St. Peter's. And where is St. Peter's Church before Ellen starts shouting at the screen? Now, I've gone through all the images now. Oh God, there was a map showing us where St. Peter's Church is. Oh, there it is. So going back a bit, it went a bit too fast then. Okay. So, right. So we don't say St. Mary's. St. Peter's Church here, we're going to look at Old Cogan. And Old Cogan Church is there. So anyone wanting to go to Old Cogan Church, which we're going to do now, is there. So if you go through Sully, you pass the church at Sully there, you go down this road, there's the old railway bridge. You go down this road, you keep going, you keep going, you keep going, you keep going, go down a bend, and then you go sharp, and there is Cogan Hall Church. Now, if you ever do go there, and a lady stops and asks you what you're doing in the farm, just tell her you're with Archaeology Cymru, and as they're friends of Archaeology Cymru, she'll probably have a good old chat with you, because we've actually rewritten the history of St. Peter's Church. And alas, do you know what I should have done? I should have just done a single church tonight, because I'm thinking that I'm rushing this, but I wanted to give you an overview of these beautiful churches. So this is a church that we're going to actually look at next, and I know a lot about it, so I'll impart a little bit about that information. Thanks to our researcher Richard, who Rosamond has met. He's done a lot of research on the church for me. So that is what the church looked like. And that is in about 1910 or 1920. In the 1880s, the church, there was no roof on the church. And in fact, rather interesting in our notes, Gillian, that we've got a reference, I think, from about the 1850s of a church service being done of a wedding on top of the church roof. And then we were on top of the church roof, yeah, because the church roof had collapsed.
Oh.
So they had the service inside the church on top of the church roof because it had all collapsed. Nobody had cleared it, and they had a service in there. It was quite strange. And we had another reference of a church service before the restorations in the 1880s, 1890s, of somebody having a service inside the church on top of the roof, and the snow was coming in. So it was quite picturesque. And interestingly enough, we did the history on the pretense that Michelle and I could have a free church wedding inside the church.
Well, you still can, I suppose.
I still can, exactly. But Pete wants me to shack up out to Flathome. So, you know, I've got people wanting me to get married everywhere, including on Orkney. So I can't get married everywhere. But St. Peter's Church, a wonderful church. And the reason why I want to do St. Peter's Church, one, it's got a roof on it. Two, it's been restored. And three, is to debunk a myth. At this wonderful church, there's herringbone, right? And everybody used to think this herringbone was actually Anglo-Saxon building. But there's a little clue to it not being what people think it is. Because if you look, the level of the ground is risen quite high. And when the archaeologists excavated it about 4 years ago, they found underneath this level, there is no herringbone. There is, in fact, a completely different phase of building, which I've actually redated the church, the early stage of the church, to date to about the 1100s, and not the later stage. The herringbone looks like it's been added as a restoration job. And we know that a large chunk of this wall was actually missing when it was restored by the Marquis of Bute, another restoration project of the Marquis of Bute. And money was ploughed into this church, and the Bute family and Cardiff Castle, we've done all that research. There's a wonderful story associated with that. And I thought if I'm going to do this church, what my lecture today was more about ruins and damage done to churches. So I wanted to add something different as well, a different nuance. So inside the church is rather interesting. So this end, as you're looking into it, you're actually looking into the church from the chancel. And above the chancel arch, there was actually recorded in the 1970s some medieval paintwork, which was just poking out from the plaster. And that was covered up, and it's still there today if they got the restorers in there. But unfortunately, as you can see, the reason why there's big chunks of internal render missing was because it was allowed to fall off at the time that the church no longer had a roof on it, which is that tragedy. But it was restored by the money from Cardiff, and bits of the original internal render, the internal whitewash remained in there. So we've still got a bit of archaeological evidence, medieval stuff, still to be discovered we're not saying it's going to be anything like inside Langford Church or anything like what's on display at Colwinston, or even for the likes of Llanmaes. But there's some stuff in there, so well, that's probably the only time I'm going to mention internal painting today. So wonderful site, wonderful church. It's quite strange, and it's a real hodgepodge because naturally the roof wasn't on it in the 1880s, and it's a pier. You can't really see it. Is actually a really nice old yew tree. And there's another yew tree as well. If you ever go to the church, right, when there's apples on the tree, so autumnal time, don't feed the apples to the pigs, because there's two big, great Gloucester black spot pigs, huge, massive beasts, right? And when we went there to do a recording of the archaeology, we took it on ourselves to feed the pigs with these apples. And they got drunk, and the lady from the local farm, she said, oh, you know, people come here and they feed my pigs and they get drunk. And at that point we ran. But anyway, I did apologize to the woman later, and she's become a friend, which is great. And we work to do a new history of this church. So we know where it is. A few more images. And there's more of the herringbone. Now I need to get onto this herringbone before Goff says get on with it. So, John, by the way, if people don't mind, I'm going to run over a little bit tonight because my enthusiasm is going to run away with me. So if that's okay with everybody, you've been warned. So moving on a little bit more, and this is what I was talking about. So sort of enlarge the image a little bit. This is actually from my own video, so I've had to cut and paste this off. What you can see, I know it's not a good image, but you'll understand. So what we've got herringbone here, the herringbone, and we've got the herringbone coming back. There you go. And what they found in the archaeology, that this was the soil level. This is how much soil was built up along the wall. And when actually, I've been a victim of this as well, believing the history. Never go to a church, Gillian, and read the history of the church before you've gone around it. Always look at, say, oh, wow, that's wonderful. Oh, wow, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And then have the guidebook, or just dispense with the guidebook altogether. Now, what used to be said was that the Anglo-Saxons got to Cogan Hall, and what they did, they built this church, and that was it. And nobody ever questioned it. Everyone said this was an Anglo-Saxon church. And then people started saying, you can't have an Anglo-Saxon church in this part of Wales because the Anglo-Saxons never got here. But the experts would say, that's herringbone. But then, when I saw this, I got, to be honest with you, right, it was like going on a new date with somebody, right? I got really excited because what I was seeing was something that I had seen somewhere else in the country. I had seen, hang on, put that line there, oh, hang on. This was all horizontal. This was all horizontal. And this was the original church. The herringbone wasn't the original church. The herringbone was patch-up work. The herringbone was probably patch-up work from the 1800s or even later. And the point is, it meant that the dating of the church was completely wrong. The history of the church was completely wrong. And I got really excited by this. Even the archaeologists who were excavating this about 4 years ago felt that there was something really wrong with the history. But I was there, and I basically said, I know what's going on. And the reason why I knew what was going on was actually because of Orkney. And the reason why I knew what was going on was because of Orkney. Was, Gillian, can you see the little clue? That there is a stress fracture. And there's loads of little stretch fractures on the stones, very fresh, get my words out, very fresh stress fractures. And this told me that this wall itself was the original medieval wall, probably dating to about the 1100s. And all the stuff, if you look about all the other stuff above it, it looks very crude. It looks really, really crude. And then over here, you've got the herringbone stuff. And I was getting so excited with this, and I realized what that stress fracture was. When we went to Orkney years ago, the first trip to Orkney, we went to something known as the Broch of Gurness. And the archaeologist Julie Gibson at the Broch of Gurness said, do you see those stress fractures? What happened is, as they built the building up further, their weight caused stress on the stones in the bottom and caused them to fracture and buckle. But these stress fractures look very new to me, meaning that most of the stonework above was relatively newer than this stonework, meaning that the herringbone was probably no more than about 200-300 years old at max, indicating this was not an Anglo-Saxon church at all, and also indicating one important thing to me, one massively important thing to me. Back at when we did a lecture not so long ago, we looked at the Lindisfarne, and they excavated a church at Lindisfarne. And this church at Lindisfarne, I remember saying my words, what they did, they built the nave first. This is a very important point. They built the nave first, not the chancel. When we go through the Vale of Glamorgan, and what we always say, now this is what I say, Gillian, take you to a church, and I say, Gillian, chancel first, nave, tower, porch, every single time. But I've been wrong in some instances, because this tells us that the nave was built first. This is part of the nave wall. On Lindisfarne, what we've got is a nave built first, and at the end of the nave, along one of the gable walls, there was the altar, which was actually connected or leaning up against the gable wall. So it means that the priest can't get behind it, that the priest's back is to the congregation, but he's also part of the congregation, and he has to turn directly to the congregation into the nave, and he had to preach. This is an early indication of an early church in the Vale of Glamorgan. And when I'm saying 1100s, I'm being very careful there, because I actually think it predates the 1100s, but maybe 100, 200 years. This is one of the earliest churches in the Vale of Glamorgan, much earlier than anything like St. Barrick's Chapel on Barry Island. This is the bee's knees. And we've got to move on. Because the thing is, one thing about these lectures on a Wednesday evening was to try and enthrall you with the rich nature of the wonderful landscape of Cymru, the rich love that we have within Cymru itself. This is actually one thing that we can actually see in the chancel as well. If you go back, this is nave building. The finest walls are in the nave building, which is the big bit of the church. And there is the chancel, and the chancel walls are really poorly built, indicating that the chancel was built after the nave, indicating, and I will admit it, when I go through the Vale of Glamorgan and tell people about churches, I have been wrong, like every single other historian and archaeologist that talks about his churches in the Vale of Glamorgan. And to be honest with you, Gillian, I love saying I'm wrong. I really, really do. And what we're going to do now is look at a very strange church. Has anyone ever been to this church? This is otherwise known as Sudbrook Church. So let me get my notes. And Sudbrook. Sudbrook Church. Rather interesting one. This isn't called St. Mary's or St. Peter's. This is called Holy Trinity Church. This is at Sudbrook. Now, where is Sudbrook? Well, I know Ellen's already left us, which is a bit of a shame, but there is Sudbrook. Sudbrook Church. It's actually a little bit away from Trinity Presbyterian Church. It's nearer the coast, Sudbrook Church. But it's named after the Sudbrook family, actually, if you want to know a little bit more. So here we go. Let's go to the image. I love this text. A lot less of this church survives now, Gillian, but that there is the highest bit of the church that actually survives. It's got a fence around it.
Where is it? Oh.
Yeah, didn't you actually just see the plan?
Well, I could see it, but I couldn't make out exactly where it is.
Right. Do you know what, Gillian? Tell me if I'm getting too excited, because that's an indication that I just have. This is the new Severn Bridge.
Ah, right. I knew it was somewhere over there because of Dewstowe Golf Club, but I was trying to work out where it was.
Yes, this is Port Stewart, if you know the area. So you've got Dewstowe Golf Club, as you just said there. And yeah, so near Caldicot, yeah, and all that. Caldicot Castle, there it is. And if you go through to Caldicot, you can go down to Sudbrook, and there it is. Interestingly, Sudbrook is an interesting example of one of those villages that was being eroded along our coastline. So go back to that now. And you can, I don't mind being told I'm too excited tonight. I'm too excited to have you got lot with me. Actually, somebody asked me yesterday, they said, the words were, are you finding all these lectures a bit difficult? And I basically said, yeah, I'm doing too many lectures, but I do enjoy Wednesday evening very much. And yeah, I am. I'm into it tonight, Gillian.
Good.
So Holy Trinity Church, Sudbrook, a dreary little street beside a paper mill, leads the way to the scant remains of Holy Trinity Church. The ruins stand perilously close to the edge of the glittering Severn estuary. It's going to go, Gillian. At the rear of a row of terraced houses and within sight and sound of the Severn Tunnel pumping station. Modern industry is never far away here, and neither is domestic refuge. But perfection anywhere is a rare occurrence, and visitors must take Sudbrook as it comes. Just under 2 centuries ago, the traveller, a G.M. Manbley, was profoundly impressed by pre-industrial Sudbrook. Its retired situation, overshadowed by trees, produced peaceful meditation, he wrote. And he went on to pen a few maudlin lines about the graceful, mantled, ivy-covered church. Manby also included a lithograph of the church in his picturesque travel log. Bingo. I think this is it. I might be wrong. Which shows an overgrown and roofless building comprising a chancel, nave, and south porch. South porch is, I think this might actually be a bit later because it's not really tying in. So there's the porch, there's the chancel, there's the nave. With a tall double bell coat. There you go, double bell coat. There it is. Bits of it left now today. Over the central dividing wall. Today, however, Holy Trinity Church has lost much of its mantle splendor, and most of the building has been reduced to a rubble-filled hollow within a railed-off enclosure. Miraculously, the bell coat and chancel arch survived to their full height. Well, when this book is being written, when this quote is being written, it still had its bell coat. So this dates to 30 years ago, the text I'm actually reading from now. I've never been to this site, so I'll admit that one. But I would like to go to it because I like sort of that idea of coastal erosion and the type of landscape there. So we got these little, hang on a minute. Yes. Oh, yes. 1858. These are some of the little etchings. I didn't actually know I had actually got these. So actually showing one of the base of the churchyard cross, some of the windows, and the piscina. The piscina is where the holy oils would have been anointed back into to drain away. That's where the holy liquids would have actually been sort of drained off. No less remarkable is the survival of the outer doorway of the porch. Here we go. So sort of, I think that the description is actually slightly off there, but there we go. Yes. I haven't got the doorway, but that there is the double bell coat, and you can actually see there. You can see one bell would have been hung above there, another bell there hung above there. You don't often get double bell coats. The bell coats in the Vale of Glamorgan are usually singularly bell coat. The one at Romley, the reconstructed Romley Church, and the original one at Romley Church in Barry was a single bell coat. And you do actually have other examples of bell coats in the Vale of Glamorgan, but we're actually talking about Gwent. Nothing, alas, survives beyond what you can actually see there today, which is a bit of a shame. Overgrown, ruined, and slowly but surely, this is going to go. And it's going to go due to the subsidence caused by its close proximation with the Severn estuary. And Look, right, yes. I said this wasn't there, but yes, this is actually the port doorway of the porch. I didn't know I had this one. This doorway of the porch. So there you go. And it's totally overgrown. It's really picturesque, and it's a shame. It's a shame that no effort's been made in any way to sort of abate the destruction to this site and evidence that there's been fires on there and all the rest of it. It's saying that after its use in the medieval period, it's reconstructed again in the 1300s. And the last recorded burial there was of Blethyn Smith, a retired sea captain who died aged 60 in 1757. On his deathbed, Smith requested that his body be consigned to the river, but he was dissuaded from this course by his well-meaning friends. The reason why he didn't want to be buried in the river is as coming on. The old sea dog commented sourly that in any case, the church would soon end up in a watery grave. So they buried his body there. Time has proved Smith wrong. However, the church hasn't gone, but lots of the graveyard has eroded into the sea. The surrounding graveyard has not been so fortunate. In the reign of Elizabeth I, the antiquarian William Camden, so I think we're talking about the late 1500s, described Sudbrook as lying so near the sea that the vicinity of a tyrannous neighbour hath spoiled it of half the churchyard. So in other words, Tyrannus River, the River Severn, has eroded away the church graveyard. And this has got something very similar when we looked at St. Mary's Church. This church as well is associated with an Iron Age fort. It goes to say, I don't know if we got any more images, that's the lovely base of the cross that you saw a little sketch of. It says erosion has removed part of the Iron Age fort that this is associated with, which was occupied up to around 50 years AD. Excavations at the fort in 1934-36 uncovered the foundations of medieval houses. Rather interesting that, because medieval houses occupying an Iron Age site, again, the church occupying that landscape as well. Similarity with our site at Caerau. So we've got a bit of a link there. And, you know, I think it's rather interesting that we've got that sense of continuity throughout the ages, that we've got Iron Age, we've got medieval, and we've got the reuse of the landscape. Gillian, anything you would like to say a minute while I take a slurp? I need a break.
No, not really, except to say that I haven't heard of any of them. And the one in Caerau, I mean, I was born and lived in Cardiff all my life. I've never heard of it.
And I got to be honest with you, that doesn't surprise me in the least. Lots of these places are like that. And here we go. Let's throw another one at you, Gillian. Slebech Church, otherwise known as St. John's Church, near Haverfordwest. Ever heard of it?
I've lost you, Carl.
Slebech.
Slebech.
Yeah, there you go.
Is it Seebach or Slebech?
There it is. It's showing on the screen. Slebech.
Oh, right.
Now this has potential for me today, because I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this. So this is what I'm going to do. It's near the Picton estate, near Haverfordwest. It says, along a shady pathway between the River Cleddau, and that's there, Cleddau the, and Slebech Hall, which is marked there, Slebech Park Estate, £134. I think that's £134 a night, because they rent their rooms out. The battlemented tower of St. John's Church rises proudly through the trees, and there it is. It is dwarfed by this estate, but there is the church there. You can see it sticking out. And actually, Gillian, the reason why I want to spend a little bit of time here is these mounds. And these mounds, they're very special. Not only in Slebech, the largest ruined church in West Wales, it is also one of the most substantial and impressive in the whole of Wales. Isn't that? Yes! You've never heard of it? I've never heard of it actually at all.
I don't get out much.
So you don't get out at all now, do you? I tell you what, if your husband's got £134, get him to is that £134 per person?
Right.
It'll be a treat for you, Gillian.
It would be a treat.
And it's by the River Cleddau. Hopefully it'll be in full flood and you'll be swept out your room, but that's another thing altogether. Oh, you'll be swept off your feet. That's what I meant. Slebech Estate, you've got the Picton Estate over here, Haverfordwest, and obviously you've got St. Clair's, and a bit further over you've got Carmarthen. But that's where it is. Okay, that's where it is. And it's you're not going to see it because you've got to go through the estate anyway. And unless you're doing a bit of fishing, you're not going to see it either. So let's sort of look at an image before I lose the plot totally. So look at those ruins. Gillian, they are impressive, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Although,
very grand.
Yes, go say that again.
They're very grand.
Yes, and now you know the whole of Cymru. There you go, impressive. Although the church itself has been restored during the last few decades and is in a fair state of preservation, much of the encircling churchyard is a veritable jungle. Well, that's all the churchyard, all those trees. And at certain times of the year, only the lofty tower and the tops of the walls can be seen peering above a leafy shroud. Love these words. The ornamental trees and shrubs which have sneaked up on the church were planted here by the affluent owners of the adjacent hall, Slebech Hall. Also now sadly past its days of glory, but used even till today. The comparative remoteness of the site was enough to signal the downfall of the church. And in the 1840s, the roof was taken off. And the landowners, the owners of the estate, would have obviously used that to sort of repatch up their own buildings. So it wasn't burnt out shells, so some of that sort of remained. And an alabaster tomb effigy of a knight in shining armor and his lady is still to be found within the ruins of the church. Now, there are a couple of other reasons why I want to mention this one. Is the origins of Slebech Old Church are linked with the name St. John, are linked with Knights Hospitallers of St. John of Jerusalem, not to be mistaken with the Knights Templars, their order being dissolved. Remember this in a quiz, Gillian. The 13th of October, Friday, in the year 1307. That's when the Knights Templars were dissolved, but the Hospitallers weren't. Both of these orders were military brotherhoods that had formed to guide and protect pilgrims on the long and hazardous journey to the Holy Land. And the Hospitallers survived. Now, anyone that knows anything about the Hospitallers of St. John's will be aware of the house that is on Newcastle Hill, the Hospitallers' house of St. John's on Newcastle Hill in Bridgend. The establishment under the control of these warrior monks sprang up all over Europe. And this, Gillian, was the HQ of the Hospitaller monks in the whole of Cymru. And the order was dissolved. Its dissolution took place in Britain in 1536. So they were suppressed. All their buildings were taken off them. Like many other monastic properties, like the Cistercians, Benedictines, and so on, this church actually survived. It survived, but because of its isolation, it was used as a church for the local community, which was quite sparse, and then used by the owners of Slebech Hall as a separate site for their own sanctity, their own senses of worship. And again, looking at that there, you can see it's looking ruinous from outside, but that stonework there, that's rather interesting to me. That stonework there is of Knights Hospitaller work. It's really grand, really ashlar, and very, very well caused. I'm going to say a little bit more about this. So I've got a little bit of a plan that I've actually copied out of this book, which hopefully will come up now. We will come back to that now. There you go. And yes, they do still do weddings there. In plan, the building forms an elongated cross that you can see. With two transepts, you can look at the plan there, the two transepts. The tower acts as an imposing entrance porch to the church and is tucked in between the nave and the corner of the north transept. What we do know is that Hospitallers were mainly responsible for the build of most of this church. So what we find is that the area of the font there, the extension of the nave area there, so the north and south transept and the tower is likely where the main Hospitallers work. And then as the Hospitallers came into a lot more money, coming into the Tudor period, they extended the church, they extended the chancel and so on. So lots of various alterations and tombs of some of the knights associated with the Hospitallers as well buried there. And a few other little bits and pieces looking at a description of the church. So what we need is to sort of get the aroma of this. So weddings there today. And it's rather interesting that you get weddings there today. And I don't know how they're getting away with it, but they have got weddings there. Me and Michelle, we wanted to get married inside. We wanted to get married outside or in a ruined site, and basically it's not legal in this country still. On Orkney it is, but if you put a tent inside the church, a ruined church, you can actually have a service and whatever. Rather complicated stuff. Anyway, I digress. So, and interesting enough, one of the changes inside the church after it had been taken off the Hospitallers was to actually build a fire inside the church so that they could actually heat the congregation, which is rather interesting. And this sets the theme. When the antiquarian Fenton visited Slebech at the beginning of the 1800s, he was one of the last travellers to describe the building as it appeared before it was dismantled. So this is after Fenton's time. So the beginning of the 1800s, it still had a roof on it. After the 1800s, it was like this. The floor of the nave is paved with small painted bricks, and that of the chancel with black and white marble. It must have looked really grand. The roof is sealed with wood in square compartments, with a flower in each angle and overlaid with the arms of the Barlow family. Not all the memorials were removed to the new church, Haverfordwest, and some tombstones lie hidden in the encroaching underground growth. One slab set up against the tower is toppled by a grinning death's head and bears the cautionary verse. Topped by a grinning death's head. So basically a death's head. It says, probably dating to the 1700s, "Death does not spare, ye most deserved lives, ye best of mothers and ye best of wives," associated with a lady that died in 1730, a certain Mary Matthias, who died at the age of 82. Now, I want to show you a couple of more images, and one we're gonna look at that rather interesting image. Oh, there it is straight away. So just looking at a couple more. The graveyard. Rather lots of graves, and this is completely overgrown now. There's trees in amongst all this, and that's a bit of a shame. One other thing I'd like to mention, I don't often come across this in my notes. There's also a consecrated pet cemetery.
Oh, nice.
So I haven't actually. I got one in my book here. It says there's an image of a dog here, and it's a proper carved gravestone. So I think that's rather interesting. And we don't mention that. They've got the only pet cemetery that I'm aware of is the one at Dunraven, actually, in the gardens, the grounds of Dunraven. Oh, and there's actually some pet graves, I do believe, at St. Fagans as well. So here we go. This is rather interesting, and you can see it quite clearly. There's mounds. These are actually, so what we have, and the writer actually mentioned this, so I'm going to mention this. You've got the church there, mounds, mounds, and mounds. A further mystery surrounds this wooded site. Just east of the church is a low ridge jutting into the muddy tidal river. Are 2 tree-covered mounds. It looks like 3. Their age and function are unknown, and although often claimed to be prehistoric burial mounds, the local name Holy Islands may imply an ecclesiastical connection. In the 1800s, a late medieval sword was found here. That could have been Excalibur. And the summit of the innermost mound has been used as a pet cemetery. Weathered headstones painstakingly carved with the names of those buried here rise up through the long grass and weeds. That's lovely, that is. I think that's quaint. I think, I think if we put the 2 lectures together, we've covered quite a bit. Now, we have got, I have done 4 churches now, and I was going to do, I do believe, did I do a 6th? You know what? I can't remember. Oh, yes, I did. I did a 6th. I did the one at Puffin Island. So this, and I'm just going to make sure that I've got everything in order. And we've got, there you go. Oh, nice. Yeah, we have got 6. If you don't mind, if everyone's okay, got 4 minutes to go, but we're going to probably do 10. So this is a rather interesting, and let's show you where it is. Oh, damn it. I forgot to put the map on there, but I'm going to have to describe where this is. This is St. Mary's Chapel near Llandudno. Now, we all know where Llandudno is. It's that thing that sticks out into Liverpool Bay, more or less. This is St. Mary's Chapel at Penrhyn. Now, St. Mary's Chapel doesn't have a roof on it anymore, but this looks a lovely, quaint little site. Penrhyn, there's my North Berlin. Penrhyn is a village clustered about the beetling cliffs of the Little Ormes Head, midway between the twin tourist haunts of Llandudno and Colwyn Bay. There is still, however, an air of rural tranquility about the area. I always feel that as well. This is St. Mary's Chapel, but few know of its existence, including you, Gillian.
Including me.
It lies at the rear of a small car park in a field opposite the 1590 Club. So it's a rather delightful little building, and there's no roof on it today. In 1535, Penrhyn was described as Libera Capella Beatea Maria del Penrhyn, basically a royal chapel of St. Mary. The Reformation had little effect on the chapel. It looked very unchanged from the Reformation all the way into more recent times, and it was undoubtedly used as a private place of worship after the period of the Reformation. I love that. I love that image. This image has come from the Royal Commission on Ancient Historical Monuments, and I think this dates probably from about the 50s. A nice little sort of cross, sort of a little bit of the Holy Trinity there, probably dating again to the 1500s sometime. Nice little light. Go on then, Gillian.
No, I was saying, and the window above.
That is brilliant, isn't it? That is
beautiful, yeah.
That's actually, that I've got to say something about that. That is not only few things we'll say about that. I was going to move on actually, but we're not going to. This is actually load bearing. This load bears the weight of the rest of the gable, and it offsets the weight as well. So this goes into the ground. So this is, and it's also a nice circular light as well. And I actually think that that's a nice bit of scroll work underneath. Do you know what? That reminds me of Peter was with me. We went to St. Lythan's Church in the Vale of Glamorgan, not far away from the burial chamber. And there was a wonderful carving there as well. And this is what this reminds me of. In the Vale of Glamorgan, I was actually going to do St. Lythan's tonight, but I thought, no, I need to sort of do a few more sites from North Wales. So where are we? Where are we? Today, that restoration work, I've missed something as well. They did a little bit of restoration work in the 1930s to the roof and all the rest of it. And the reason why I said that roof that you're looking at was probably more like the 1950s, maybe push that on to the 1960s, was because all that restoration work done in the 1930s was undone, because this is what it looks like 1950s, 1960s. It's quite strange how quick these sites fall into disrepair and ruin. And this is what it looked like inside. You know, it's like, it's rather strange. It's almost as if you're looking at the moments before the whole thing collapses in. And you've got, I can't put this to words. It's quite eerie, actually. And I'm going to sadly say that, in fact, other than the roof being on it, this looks like the interior of Llanbranach's church outside Cowbridge. Unless we're careful, we're going to lose that one as well. There's only 2 services at Llanbranach's church outside Cowbridge. I'm told there's actually only one now at Christmas Day or Boxing Day or something like that. Anyway, this has now lost its roof. Today, that restoration work has been undone, and neglect has reduced Penrhyn Chapel to a romantic ruin. And this is taken from the Royal Commission book as well. And this sort of shows you what this looked like. And actually, Gillian, right, this is what the church at St. Peter's looked like before they added the chancel to it. You can see there that the altar butts onto the wall instead of having the altar in front, which means that when the priest is offering a sermon or the monk is offering some kind of a sermon, he's got to face the congregation, and there's no barrier between him and the congregation. So he is part of the congregation. He's part of the life of the church, rather than when you put the chapel on, there's a division of the vulgaris and the holy people, which is when the church changes. And I think in lots of ways, I've always agreed, I've become very much an exponent of the dissolution of the monasteries and all the rest of it. So just do a little bit more. We went to the other image there. If anyone ever gets to go up to Penrhyn, it'd be well worth a visit. Mark my words, very much well worth a visit. Now we're going to be looking at the last building today, and I didn't think all this was there. We're going to look at Puffin Island off Anglesey. Gillian, not to be patronising, you haven't been here either, have you?
I went to Anglesey in February, but I haven't been there, no.
No, I think you need one of Pete's outboard motor jobs to get out to here. No, actually, I think it's I think at low tide you can actually get out there. I think so. Puffin Island. This is what remains at Puffin Island. It's quite strange because there's nothing else there. So over the centuries, Puffin Island has had many names, the present one being no more than a nickname. To the feared sea-loving Vikings, this whale-shaped limestone rock was known as Priest Home. And to the Welsh, Llys Lanark or Llys Cyril, the island of St. Cyril. And there's Puffin Island, one of Peter's homes. So when Peter talks about his flat home and his steep home, you can also mention Priest Home, Puffin Island, Pete.
Yeah, I think we saw it, but obviously we didn't go there.
And only in the winter months can you actually see the tower.
Right.
So there you go, because it does get overgrown. There it is. Doesn't that look nice? That looks really old. It looks like the type of thing that you get in Ireland. Saint Cyril, in the 500s, who founded both a monastery on the island and one on the mainland, Penrhyn Chapel. This takes us into about the 1100s, but probably a little bit before that. The stonework, but whatever was there was founded in the 500s by Saint Cyril. He is said to have been related to Penrhyn, a king that ruled in the north in about the 600s. In AD 632, Puffin Island entered recorded history when Cadwallon, king of Gwynedd and a descendant of Penrhyn, was besieged on the island by Edwin, king of Northumberland. This event recorded in the Chronicles of the Princes. It's also significant in that this records the furthest penetration into Cymru by the kings of Northumberland in the 600s. During the 1100s, the rocky island was a hive of monastic activity. In fact, it would have resembled a medieval version of well-known Greek monasteries. Giraldus Cambrensis, writing in 1188, writes of it, inhabited by hermits who live in the service of God by the labor of their hands. Many bodies of their saints are deposited there, and no woman is allowed to enter the island. I reckon there would have been a couple shacked out on the island. There must have been. Gerald also recounted a more tongue-in-cheek story about what would occur should the monks quarrel with each other. Do you know what? I haven't read this one. Little bits. This is part of the monastery as well. A blocked-up monastic wall. Puffin Island, and you know what? I want to go to. Hang on a minute. That's all that's there. Let's go back to one of the other images to set the scene. Here we go. One of Gerald's accounts from the island, what they would get up to. A species of small mice which abound on the island consume most of their food and drink and befoul the rest. As soon as their argument is over, the plague of mice disappears immediately. What he's referring to is if any of the monks argue, the mice take their food. And if they stop arguing, then the mice no longer take their food. And you're thinking, hang on a minute, these are very pious people. Why are they arguing in the first place? All that remains today of the early monastic settlement is a group of square dwelling huts, or cells within a stone-walled enclosure, all ruined and partly obscured by the undergrowth. More obvious and clearly visible is this tower. This has 3 floors, rising to a height of 40 feet, and is surmounted by a pyramidal stone roof. Although nothing now survives of the nave and chancel, really, their roof lines can be seen on the sides of the tower. There are also the ruins of a post-Reformation cottage. Today, the island is uninhabited by man. There are gulls, guillemots, cormorants, puffins, rabbits, rats. The island abounds in these little creatures. Boat trips around Priestholme can be booked from Llandudno, but the rats ensure that the monastic ruins rest in peace from the clatter of would-be pilgrims. So you can sort of look at it, but I don't think you can land, but maybe you can. I'm just gone back on my images. I am missing one image. It was showing you the entirety of the island. We can't see the entirety of the island, sadly, but that's looking down at that tower. And the reason why I'm looking at this and thinking, that to me looks as if it's connected to the land. I might be wrong, but at really low tide, you might be able to get access to the island. I could be proven to be wrong on that. And do you know what, Gillian? We've done a good hour and 10 minutes. I believe that was worthwhile. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And have you got any questions you'd like to ask before I put the mics on, Gillian?
No, I don't think so, but I've enjoyed it.
I have as well. And next week, we're going to be looking at King Rodri, and we're going to be looking at a historian known as Edward Llwyd. And Edward Llwyd's work is fascinating. I will be critical of him, but I will introduce some sites that we've not mentioned up until next week. So I'm going to stop the screen sharing. And I hopefully this has been a bit for everybody tonight. And we did lose somebody else. So we lost Ellen. And we lost Pam. It was a reception. So let's unmute everybody. And obviously we will be back next week, hopefully seeing everybody tomorrow. Don't forget to join me on Friday afternoon on YouTube. It's live. It's fine. Peter, what would you like to say today?
A couple of things. That one on the Cledai,
yes.
It's just up the river from Llangwm, where my daughter's got a static caravan. We spend quite a bit of time, and I've been up the river, but I've never actually seen that church.
I think you should get out there. Knock on the door of the estate. I think they'll let you have a look because they rent.
I probably will.
Yeah,
one other thing you said is the connection between the St. John's Hospitallers and that church.
Yes, yes.
And of course, that's the basis for the St. John's ambulance of today.
Yes. The legacy of St. John's ambulance, the warrior knights of St. John, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
And I say those other churches, I mean, they're almost mirror images of the places like the Old Village and Merthyr Devon and those churches.
Caddy, yeah, exactly. And I would like to say this sort of, do you know what? When we started doing the history on a Wednesday, I thought we wouldn't have enough material to do a whole one, and then we've got enough material to do another one. And if say in a couple of weeks you say, right, let's just do some more on Wednesday evening, I would be up to that because we've got a church part 3 to do. I sat down yesterday and I said I haven't done this with them. And I thought I'm not going to have an opportunity. So think about that maybe for next week, what you think. Goff, what would you like to say?
Yeah, you mentioned St. Mary's the Virgin in Ely. That's where I was baptised in 1951.
Bugger me. So you must have
been... thank you.
You must have gone into the church after the refurbishment. You must have...
51. Well, I can't remember really. I was only a little baby. Because we moved from Ely a couple of years after that. My brother was also baptised there in 1949.
And it's just you must feel aggrieved at the way it turned out.
Yes, it's very, very, very sad. But what do you expect where it is?
So how do you get to it, Goff, from Cowbridge Road?
I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Del if he's got any questions, and I'm going to get the map up and we can look at that. So Del, anything you'd like to say?
No, I really enjoyed that. It was really fascinating. Just to say that I can't join you tomorrow because I've got a meeting in my son's school.
That's okay. I hope everything goes well with you and your son. And,
yeah, it will do.
So what I'm going to ask is I'm going to show us... Pat, you say your bit. We'll look at the plan, then Rosamond, and we'll call it a day. What would you like to say, Pat?
I was a bit confused about the Holy Trinity Church and Sudbrook. Is it near?
Sudbrook, yes.
Haverford West, is that where it's near?
No, that's you got Slebech, which is in West Wales, and you got Sudbrook, which is over the crossing. So there's 2 separate sites. So the Severn Crossing. I'll tell you what. We'll
Severn Crossing. That's it.
That's the Severn Crossing. Yeah,
I forgot. Yeah.
Sudbrook, exactly. So I tell you what. Before we ask Gillian if she's got anything, let's have a look at how to get to this church. So basically, let's go on a little journey. So it's difficult to find if you get lost, which is
right.
which is a bit Irish. So basically, if you go down your Cowbridge Road, avoiding the speed cameras, and then you take a tight. You take a tight right, and the plan is to keep going down this. There's flats and stuff on the right. Keep going, and there's don't go down that right. Go down the. So you've got the third right And then there's a community centre or something by here. Park by the community centre. It's a dead end. They've blocked it off. And then you walk up the hill. To be honest with you, I wouldn't park by the community centre. I'd park somewhere in the streets there. So go walk down here, and then you see the church in front of you.
Right. Hmm.
And don't go there at night.
No, don't go there. There's nothing to see anyway.
Oh, right.
It's
Yeah.
all knocked down. It's all knocked down, and it's a shame.
It's such a
It went downhill after 1951.
Of course.
I don't know what that, I don't even know what that says. Well, after your brother was baptized. Right, okay, Rosamond, what would you like to say?
That's just interesting to see how the deterioration happened so fast.
Because the interesting point is we've got that with a few churches there. We've got that with the one at Penrhyn. We've got the one at St Mary's at Penrhyn, and we got St Mary's at Caerau as well. It's the same thing. Maybe it's all these St Mary's churches that are affected by a wrath of God.
I think, you look at St Peter's Old Cogan, and that's really in quite good condition, isn't it? How it's been kept. So
but it's still loved.
Yes.
When we went there, Carl, we went up the Drover's Way, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And that was a weird one, Pete. That day, Barbara
you were telling us about the two lakes as we were going up, which was were farmed with fish for the local populace, I believe.
Exactly. Yes. The fish ponds. Yes. Exactly.
What did you call them? They had a name for them. You told us. I can't remember.
Not the leap ponds. The not the fish ponds. Yeah, there was a specific name. You know what, Peter? Things do leave my mind occasionally, and that one there you are right. There's a specific name for them, Pete. Yeah. I'm not sure, but if you go there, I think it's with the information that you can actually find on it. So if nobody's got anything else to say, I'm gonna love you and leave you. I will see you all tomorrow. Well, no, I'll be seeing Goff tomorrow, Pat tomorrow, Del tomorrow.
Not me.
Not Del.
No,
not
he's
Del.
still playing.
He's off somewhere tomorrow. So okay then. I really appreciate that you joining us tonight, and I hope you've all enjoyed tonight. And
Great, thank you.
And I really appreciate that. And I will see you all soon. So if anyone wants to chat at the end, they're very welcome. But I'm going to say goodnight to Peter, Goff, Pat, Del, Rosamond, Jill, Pam that we didn't manage to get to. And see you all soon. Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Very interesting evening. Good night, all. I'm off now.
Good night.
Good night.
Rosamond.
Bye.
Night.
All right.
Night, Gillian. Night.
Night. Oh.
It's me and you. Oh, mainstream. Night.
Oh, hang on, I haven't switched off yet.
No, you haven't.
Go.
Go on.